Record on this computer. All right, there we go. All right, so we are recording officially now. Um, I mean, we can wait a few minutes. People log on late, or we just get started, and people log on late, and that's just the way it goes. But as far as any housekeeping or announcements, there's not much. Obviously, with things the way they are. There is some initial talks going on with. Are we going to meet in person at RPAC? What are we going to do? I don't know at this point. So if you guys have some idea of what you want as far as that's concerned, feel free to just shoot an email over to the club so that everybody can see it, or just post it online. Like, what are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable meeting in person indoors? I think that's that's really the question. Is that something you'd even be comfortable doing? I know where my vote is, but that's is what it is for now. But yeah, we're going to be meeting, the leadership group will be meeting in the next probably week or so, hopefully, to discuss these things, because I don't even know if RPAC at this point is hosting anything indoors. So who knows? But restaurants are back at 100%. So
yeah, as long as there's mask and alcohol for hand and mouth, we should be okay.
So the problem with the whole masks and alcohol thing is once you have enough alcohol, and you might just take the mask off for good. You can't really drink alcohol through the mask. So,
the best mask I saw was the fly of a pair of jeans, so you could unzip it to drink and then zip it back up.
Yeah, I saw one that had like a built-in straw. You sort of leaned forward and took a sip. But yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, as far as information, I don't really have anything right now that's concrete, but I'll definitely, as soon as we do, we'll get it out to you so you guys know what's going on. I would like to get us out for at least an outdoor shooting, do something together, and play around with cameras. It seems to be what we like to do as a group.
Yes.
So if you guys, again, if you have ideas, certainly shoot them over our way. If you just someplace you want to go, you just want to do a photo walk around someplace, we'd be happy to organize something. I think if it's outdoors and we can maintain some distance, I don't see why we can't do it, to be honest. So indoors is a whole different story, but outdoors with a little bit of distance, I think we should be okay. So that's all I have for you right now. Regular meetings start up again next month in September. Normally we wouldn't be doing anything in August, so Mr. Moss here is a bit of a gift to you guys for sticking with us. He's coming to us from London. He's going to tell us about his action and sports photography. I believe he's going to go through some of his processing and stuff that he does in that. I may be wrong about that. I haven't actually seen the presentation, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. Like always, try and make sure you're muted. But if you have questions, I'm sure Andrew would just love for you to blurt them right out. So it's hard to see hands when they're up.
There's not many of us, so if you got anything, just shout it out, because then we're on point then, rather than having to wait till half time. I tend to stop about after 45 minutes, get another cup of tea, so I'm nice and oiled up. But other than that, we'll rock on.
So, and also make sure your chats are open, because I've found that some speakers, that you can type in a chat sometimes and they'll see it and answer the question. And if I notice something in there as well, like if you don't want to interrupt him if he's in the middle of something and you just want to pop it in the chat, if I see it, I'll interrupt him for you.
Yeah, do shout, Sean, because sometimes I don't pick the chats up if I'm sort of deep in thought.
Yeah, no, mine is up. I'll leave it up. If I catch anything, I'll let you know. Other than that, I guess that's it. So I'll hand it over to Andrew. Let him wow you this afternoon. Yeah, that's all I got.
Good. Okay, I'll share my screen, see if we can get this to work. Now, are you getting that? He shoots, he scores.
Got it.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. He shoots, he scores. How I shoot sports pictures that sometimes do well in club competitions. So, like you guys, I'm involved in the club scene, in camera clubs. In South London, we're a bit spoilt. There are something like 14 camera clubs in South London region. So none of us are really big clubs. We've got about 50, 60 members, visiting judges on a circuit, because we've got, again, because we're in metropolitan area, we've got plenty of judges to choose from. Some are better than others. The ones that give you high scores are great, and the ones that give you low scores are rubbish. That's pretty standard. So let's have a look and see what I do and where I come from and so on. So that's me, andrewmoss.co.uk. That will take you to my SmugMug website. @MossPhoto is my Instagram, a little bit on Twitter, but basically it's Instagram. So going back in time, I used to work in the printing industry, and back in would have been the 80s, I did have a DSLR, which I bought, must have been about around 1980, a Canon AE1, and I never really used it for anything other than shooting family pictures, I guess. Sent them off to the lab to be developed and just got them back as you normally would. But this particular day at work, one of the sales guys had been in to see a publisher and come back with a whole load of books, which the publisher had going spare, and said, anybody want to take one? And there was a book by a guy called Eamon McCabe, who is one of the top sport photographers. He shot for The Guardian and The Observer, two of the top newspapers in the UK. He was their full-time sports photographer, and this is a photograph that I saw in this book, which I was glad to be able to take home, and I've still got. And actually, I've since met Eamon, and he's kindly signed the book for me and went and had a beer with him, which was great. But this is a picture that stuck in my mind, and I guess it's what sort of made me realise that there was this great avenue of sport photography that wasn't just about, in a way, the standard picture. There were pictures that could be had which had a greater interest than just snapping sport. And again, when I think what he was doing here on film, pushing it up, I guess 1600 ASA in those days, trying to get the picture, and this, it made it obviously into the newspaper, and he reckons this is one of the best pictures of all time, and one of the ones that really started him as a top sports photographer. So that was always there in the back of my mind. And I picked my first DSLR up in something like, it was about 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago. And it coincided with the trip to the Manchester Velodrome. So Great Britain were just beginning to do well at track cycling in those days. And we had a couple of guys who were up for winning medals at the Olympics and that sort of thing. And this is our team pursuit guys going around the track. And this is one of the very first pictures that I took. So looking back on it now, I look at that and think, oh, well, okay. I shows I'm learning my craft, shall we say. Used the camera for holiday, and this is just with the kit lens that came with it. So this was on the west coast of France, just some guys surfing. Because we're on the west, we've got the sun going down behind them, backlighting the waves. And I guess again, I was still working out what to do and how to do it with the camera, trying to get the best out of it. And then, of course, a couple of years after I got my camera, we were lucky enough to host the Olympics in London in 2012. And this was taken in 2011 at one of the warm-up events. So being fortunate to live in London with the London Olympics, every venue had a trial event or trial events to make sure that they were up and ready to run, ready to rock and roll. And this was the BMX races held. This was the very first of the warm-up events. And this, again, there's no Photoshop in terms of the bikes. So to be fair, I did get rid of some lampposts behind. But great for me that there was just that separation. And again, this is where it started, I guess, to turn around for me and thinking, oh, there's more to be had out of this sport photography. So my journey was definitely starting properly. And again, back at the velodrome. I love the velodrome. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but if you can get to a velodrome, the beauty of that is that although you may be allocated a seat, you don't have to sit in it. You can wander around, so you can literally get right up against the barrier. I don't particularly like you leaning over with your camera just in case you drop it, which I have seen happen. But again, this time I've moved on a bit. I've worked out that if you drop the shutter speed a little bit, you can get a little bit of motion going in the wheels. So as Sean knows, I'm sure, if you take a picture of something that's moving past you and everything looks totally static, you don't get the impression of speed or movement if everything is frozen. So you've got a bit of panning going on in the background. This picture actually is sharp enough so that you can see the guy who is following him reflected in the visor of his helmet. So it's one that I'm still particularly pleased with. And here's another one, same effect, probably a slightly slower shutter speed on this one. Again, these are just shot over the barrier. There's no particular access involved with these. It's just public access, and away you go.
Andrew, do you recall what the shutter speed was on those?
No, I don't. I tell you what to do is if you do look at my website, which is andrewmoss.co.uk, what you'll see there is the smug mug thing. If you press the I button on that, it will give you all of the information, the XE information on the shot as I've taken it. So I don't tend to hide my settings. So on the website, you can usually see the settings that I've worked to. So again, this is where I've moved on to a full frame camera at this point. So rather than the Nikon D90 I started with, this is a D600. I've got myself, I think, a 70-200mm lens. So again, I'm still shooting this from the crowd. But this again is a little bit of the before and after thing, and I will come back to this later on. Here we are. This is a guy called Chris Hoy, who I think is now our most decorated Olympian. I think he's got 6 gold medals. This is, I think, before his first one, and he's there on the start line. But again, with a little bit of processing, a little bit of cropping, we end up with a picture which tells the story that I wanted to. So I call this one Race Face, because he's there, he's totally in the zone. We can see the starter reflected in his visor. They wear these mirrored visors so that their opponents can't see their eyes and see where they're looking. But for a photographer, it's the great photo opportunity. So this was the first event after the Olympics to be held on one of the Olympic venues. So one of the big things about picking the Olympics up from the organising committee is that you have a big plan for post-Olympics and how the venues are going to be used, the legacy. So the very first legacy event was an international canoeing event at the Canoe Slalom venue built just north of London. And because it was a bit like the cycling, I just saw this event was going to happen. I thought, well, this is great. I can apply for a ticket, just get a ticket and go along and watch and take the camera along with me, which I duly bought a couple of tickets. But while I was on the website, I just saw a little section that said media. So I clicked on that, and it said, if you want to get a media pass, you just fill in your information, which I did in all innocence, just sent the photo along. And much to my surprise, they gave me a media pass. So I ended up going there, picking up a life jacket to wear, following the instructions. But I was sitting on the bank next to all of these pro photographers from Getty and Reuters and Press Association and wherever they are. Really hadn't got a clue, but I had great fun. So I went along to one of the warm-up days, one of the training days, and then this is from the event itself. So afterwards, I thought, well, what are all these other guys doing? What pictures are they taking? And how do mine stack up compared to them? So I was looking through what the Getty website had got to say for itself and the pictures that they got. If you look at this and the way the splash is working across the guy's face, this is from Justin Setterfield, one of the Getty images for sale. So I'm just going to go backwards and forwards a couple of times, and you can see it is literally the same shot taken at the same time, and we're sat next to each other. And I'm thinking, well, okay, if this is the case, then my pictures are actually worthy. There's another one here by Justin. This is one of the German canoeists, giving it large as he heads down the course. And then my picture is basically exactly the same. I mean, it's really weird that we were sat next to each other, pressing the shutter button at exactly the same time and processing the same pictures. But this picture then had a double whammy for me because there was a Nikon sort of competition just before Christmas where I think it was called the 12 Days of Christmas. And if you there were different categories on the 12 days. Sport came around, so it's like, oh great, okay, let's put a sport picture in, and this one went in, and it was shortlisted. I think they shortlisted 6 pictures, and then it was down to the public to vote on Facebook which one they felt was best. And I knew at that point I wasn't going to win anything. There were some really, really good prizes. I mean, they were giving away cameras and all sorts at one point. So, right, this isn't going to win, because one of the other pictures was a great picture of some disabled kids playing football, and was real sort of, not only was it a good picture, it was sort of tugged at the heartstrings as well. So it's like, okay, great, I'm glad I've got to the shortlist section. And then, much to my surprise, a week or so after the competition finished and the said picture did win, I got an email from Nikon which said, you've been chosen as the judge's favourite. So the public have chosen theirs, but the judge has picked your picture as the one that is going to get a prize. It wasn't a great prize. I mean, it was a day at the Nikon school, which to be fair was definitely worth having. But for me, the best thing was that the judge was a guy called Bob Martin. Oh, hang on, I've just noticed my camera's frozen. I'm going to try unfreezing it, and if that doesn't work, we'll change over. Oh, there we go. Right. If that happens again, then I'll change it over. But so yeah, the bit that I was really pleased about was that this guy called Bob Martin had chosen my picture. Now, Bob Martin is the only full-time Sports Illustrated photographer to be based outside the US. So was covering worldwide sport for Sports Illustrated, basically mainly around Europe, but he was flying around all over the place, and is my absolute photographic hero, shall we say. Really nice guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times since at different events. He is the photo chief for the Olympics. So since London, he's done every Olympics, winter and summer. So he organises the photographic stations where the guys are going to stand, and the background to them, getting the best views for the photographers from all around the world. He's also photo chief for Wimbledon. So he organises all of the photography and the photographers every year for Wimbledon. So for this guy to pick my picture and feel it was worthy was, for me, the biggest pat on the back, and I guess was the absolute validation that I was after, that I could do sport photography. That was my journey to, I guess, some sort of validation as far as I was concerned. So this is what I do now. So this is some of the sports on my website: slalom canoeing, basketball, netball, squash, rugby union, tough guy, and so it goes on. I reckon I've covered something like 49, very nearly, possibly 50, I haven't quite worked it out, different sports. And as I was talking to Sean earlier, the problem that is for me is that I can't get access to the biggest sports and the biggest events. If I want to cover the FA Cup final, which I guess is your equivalent of the Super Bowl, there's absolutely no chance. And I can't even get to cover a regular Premier League football or soccer match. I can get into some fairly high level events now because I have now got a full press card. But if you want to get into the absolute highest level on a regular basis, you've really got to be working for Getty or one of the top 2 or 3 agencies. So the majority of what I cover is minority sports, and some of what we're going to see today is sports that I guarantee you will never have heard of. But again, have a look at the website. There's a huge range, and for me, the great fun is finding the new sports and seeing what I can get out of them. So this is the Beckenham Photographic Society. Beckenham is a suburb of London. As I said, I'm active on the committee of that. I'm currently program organizer. So we have a few pictures, each of us, on the Photographic Society website. A lot of what I do, I work with a company called Sport on Spec. They promote accessible sport in London. So if you guys say, well, to come over to London for a week and yeah, go and see the sites, do the usual tourist things. But if you wanted to see a top Premier League soccer match you probably wouldn't be able to, because effectively they are sellouts. You could pay somebody ridiculous money to get in, quite probably, but the reality is there is a lot of accessible sport in and around London, and these guys at Sport on Spec will be keen to promote it. So I work with them now on a fairly ad hoc basis when it suits both of us. So I can rock up to something like this, which is 6-day cycling, which was at one point big in the States. So there's an event called the Madison, which is named after Madison Square Gardens, where it was first race. So that still happens in the Olympics now. But what I will do is go along on the first night, take a few pictures. I will download them from the camera to the phone. I'll process them quickly on the phone, whiz them off to Sport on Spec, and they will then promote those using those pictures that have arrived quite quickly, so that they can put it on Instagram, put it on the social media feeds, and work with the organisers to promote the accessible sport. So that's the typical, I think that's an Instagram page, as is that one. That was netball at one of the London venues again. So I can get their pictures quickly and effectively without too much stress, and it gets them pictures and it gets me access. So that's a win-win for both of us. Again, my pictures will get picked up by different places. So this Wigan Warriors is rugby league. They're one of the, they're probably one of the top teams. So again, where there's been an event down in London where they've been playing, I've taken some shots, and they said, "Oh, quick, can we grab some?" And off they go onto their website. I'm also now getting picked up by some of the smaller, the minority sports. So this is air guns. So it's the British. This is the British Open Air Gun Championships, which I went along to shoot. And as a result of that, they've picked up and have asked me to go and shoot different events for them. Although, to be fair, since then, they've all been cancelled. So I was due to go up to Scotland for them to shoot for a few days up there, but that didn't happen. And everything else at the moment is on hold. But again, I think they wanted it because I tend to take a different sort of picture. I'm not doing the pure journalist stuff. I'm trying to bring a bit of photographic interest to it. So focusing on the view through the guy's glasses rather than just on the pistol. The white square is actually the target of the guy in the next lane. And again, this is a top-down shot of the shooting station of one of the competitors. So all the little dots in the bottom right-hand corner are his airgun pellets. And he's got his ear defenders there, and a little note to himself to take a break. The other thing I'm doing is I'm now starting to work with Nikon School. Again, this hasn't happened because everything that we had lined up for this year has sadly been cancelled. But while I was on a trip with them to Iceland, which I was on as a customer, which we got going in February, I pitched to them that I could lead some sport photography courses for them. So I'm now down to be leading some Nikon School events coming up, which will now be next year. So how do I do what I do? And the first thing is research. So before I go to any event, I will look at the internet and see what it's all about. And it isn't all about just finding what the latest guys are doing with the latest gear. This was taken in 1842, so very soon after photography was established as a medium. So this exposure on this must have been possibly minutes, possibly into the minutes. So the guys had to stand incredibly still. I just love this picture. It's a really evocative pose. The guy's in his long trousers, going to be playing a game of tennis, I presume, with a really seriously old-fashioned, where are we, 100 and whatever it is years old, 170 years old or something. But for me, it's still a great picture. So the fact that pictures may be old or different doesn't mean that they're not worthy. And again, this is something where I was due to be going to Birmingham to the final Olympic trials for the British gymnastics squad. It was an international event, but it was being billed as the trial for the Olympics. I saw this picture while I was looking for inspiration, looking for ideas, and again, just a time-lapse exposure of somebody on a bar, which would have worked great if I could have got to the event, but it was all cancelled. again, I'll follow people on Instagram. Zach Goodwin is a young lad who shoots for the Press Association. I kept bumping into him at different events where we were both in the photographer's pit. Looked at his Instagram and it's like, yeah, great, Zach's doing some great stuff. So why not follow Zach and see what he comes up with and get a view on things. And it's not just about sport. Fred Barrington is a member of the Camera Club that I'm a member of, and he takes very graphic images. Like he loves architecture. He'll just wander around the city of London picking up pictures, finding angles and pictures that nobody else does. If we go on a photo walk together, Fred always comes back with something completely different. So for me, again, there's get your creative juices flowing by getting different sorts of photography coming at you. Julianne Cost, I don't know if any of you know her. She is an Adobe evangelist, is her official title. She is a great person working for Adobe. She does really good short videos on everything to do with Lightroom, Bridge, Photoshop, but herself is a great photographer. And I knew I would be going to Iceland, and these are from her trip to Iceland, at a different time of year to when I went. But again, the sort of imagery that she ends up with, again, would get my creative juices flowing, and the pictures just stay there in the back of your mind. So you're not copying, you're finding inspiration from other people. And again, I saw this graffiti when I was just trawling around on the internet a few years ago. There's an area of London which is known for its graffiti up in Shoreditch. So I knew that these wings were there. It took me a little while to find them because I just seen the picture of them, but had to dig around a bit to find the actual location. So I went up one Sunday morning and just said to there was a passing couple. So I just said, do you mind just standing there and me taking your picture? And she said, no, not a problem. And of course, first thing she does is get on her phone. So as the area is called Shoreditch, I call this one the Angel of Shoreditch. And this one has done quite well for me in Camera Club competitions. So research. If I'm going to a new sport, a new event, first thing I'll do is look up what's out there. So this is images for parkour, because I knew I'd be going for a day shooting a couple of guys doing parkour on the south bank of the Thames in the middle of London. So there we have it. We had one of those pictures was similar to this. I knew I'd be down by the London Eye. As it happens, we're shooting into the sun. A small aperture, so we get the sun rays coming out at the top there. We get the silhouette. And I just said to the guy, can you do us a somersault in front of the London Eye? So we've got the going round and the going round all at the same time. And again, get them to pose in front of the landmarks if you can. So we've got St. Paul's Cathedral. We're on the other side of the river. There's a little bit of a pier. So I asked if he could go and do a handstand on the pier. So we've got a combination of the history and the landmark together with the athlete balancing over a big drop. At one point, one of the guys was actually doing a handstand right on the edge of the parapet of one of the bridges over the Thames, which I didn't even want to look at, let alone take a photo. It was scary. And again, another one where they're doing something a little bit surreal, really. And this, again, is weird how these things sort of go round. I don't know if any of you know the film called The Italian Job. The original was done with 3 mini cars whizzing around the streets of Turin. And there's one of the scenes is where the cars jump over a road on top of a building. So they're driving on top of the building and jump over the road from one building to another. And it's very strange. I was looking at a book which I was going to buy my dad for Christmas. And you just sort of inevitably read a paragraph or two while you're browsing. And the director said that's one scene that he got wrong. Because what he worked out afterwards, that if you want to make something look impressive in terms of height, you do it from the bottom looking up, not from the top looking down. And he shot that one of the minis jumping between the buildings from the top of the buildings. So it just looked like they were jumping. You didn't get any sense of scale. And when we set this one up, I said, right, I'm going right down the bottom with wide angle lens because that's going to give it the biggest sense of impact. So again, it was just about somewhere there, the research, without even realizing I was doing it, ended up with a picture that I was happy with. And this is one of my favorite pictures and one of my least successful at the same time. This is the same event. The guy is jumping off the wall that I'm stood on top of, doing a somersault and landing on the beach below on the banks of the Thames. So he's literally in the middle of a somersault and about to land on his feet on the sand below. And I love this picture, but one of the traps that we fall into as photographers is that we know the backstory. We know what happened. We're invested in the picture, whereas the viewer isn't. And my problem with this is I see this picture and I know what it's about. And it's weird and it's sort of slightly disturbing because you don't know what's going on. But when I put this into a camera club competition, the judge said, well, this is obviously one of those pictures where you balance somebody on a stool and then you Photoshop the stool out so it looks like they're hovering. And on that basis, you'll be a lot better taking it from the side, so it would look as though they really were hovering, and be better if they were the other way up and wearing some nice clothes. So, well, he's probably right, but it's not my picture and it's not what I was taking. So that's where the ambiguity is there as a viewer. You don't know what's going on. And I like that ambiguity, but it was actually so ambiguous that the guy hadn't got a clue. So a failure in camera club terms. So backgrounds. When I've done my research, I've found out about the sport, I've looked at other pictures that people have taken. And the first thing I will do when I get to a venue is check the background out. If it's an open air venue, I will have looked on Google Maps, Google Earth, worked out where the sun is likely to be. But in sport photography, for me, it's all about making the event, making the picture stand out. And there is a great diving picture there, totally spoiled by the background. It doesn't work. And the same thing here. This is Crystal Palace, which used to be our national sports centre. And architecturally, it's an absolute mess. And trying to take a nice, clean action picture there just doesn't work. So that might have been a good picture, other than the fact you can't actually see what's going on. And that same venue can get good pictures. So if the light is right, and in this instance, this is roller derby, which I know, or I imagine you guys are familiar with. Over here, it's an unknown sport. It really is something which is very niche. I stumbled on it. I've been to 3 or 4 events. I think there are only 2 or 3 men's teams. It is basically a women's sport here. So the London Roller Derby are one of the top teams in the UK. And in this instance, it's in the same venue, but because we've got the shaft of sunlight that she's going through, there is the opportunity to get her standing out. And a similar thing here, managed to find a plain background where the seats are all stacked out of the way. So we get more impact. I'm just going to see if I can swap my camera over. Just bear with me. I don't know if this will work on here. No, I'll turn it off and turn it on again. I'm back. Right, we're just going to have. I'm afraid that's going to have to keep happening. The Nikon obviously isn't up to keeping going for more than a few minutes at a time. Anyway, where were we? So yes, backgrounds. You've got to find them. This is the Copper Box, which is one of the ex-Olympic venues and is characterized by the most awful seating. It has bright coloured seats, and the London Lions, who are the only professional, I know there are 2 professional basketball teams in London now, that's their home, and one of the netball teams plays there as well. But the crowds tend to be fairly sparse, so even by cropping in and enhancing the picture a little bit, we've still got the lady in red. We've still got a nasty background there. They're not far enough away to be able to get them out of focus. You can find the picture. Sometimes if you can get the aperture open wide enough, we can see the player in front, we can see the crowd behind. I've got the coach, in no uncertain terms, telling them what should be happening. Slow shutter speed. This is work in progress, I think. This isn't, I know who it is. It's Brandon Peel, one of their star players. I know he's running down the wing with the ball. It should have been a little bit of a faster shutter speed. There's too much motion there, I think, to make it work. But I will end up with a slow shutter speed basketball picture that works. And this is the copper box at its worst, where the seats are empty. They're playing netball. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a version of basketball. It's actually very hard to shoot because they don't run with the ball. As soon as they touch the ball, they have to stop. So it's the ball that does the movement rather than the players, but you don't know where they're going to throw it to. She looks like she's going to be throwing it to the girl on the right, but quite possibly could be throwing it somewhere else. So to anticipate, I have found it means more luck than judgment. But by getting up high, you can look down, you can lose the nasty backgrounds, and it is possible to zoom in on some of the action. And again, if they're close enough and the seats are full, the venue's full, then we get a nice dark background because the crowd blurs into nothingness. So we can get a bit more separation between the athletes and the background. I call this no net, no ball, because it is netball, but you can't actually see what's happening. I love the fact that the girl in front is floating, but this again is one of the pictures that I like, but I don't think a judge would, because it doesn't say enough perhaps about the sport. But for me, the look of anticipation, who's going to get the ball, you know it's coming, it's all about to happen. And again, sometimes there are characters that you can find. There's this girl had absolutely great red extensions in her hair. So wherever she was going, her hair was following. So although we don't get to see her face, we get to see something which shows the action in a slightly different way. So back to the diving. This was one of the international events that I did get a nice access to. All sorts of Chinese advertising, because presumably it's huge in China, and that's where the most revenue is going to come from, the advertising. But again, it made for messy backgrounds. So by getting up into the crowd, rather than staying in the photographer's pen, by getting right up to the very top of the crowd at the back, you could look down on it and get a different view. Very high shutter speed, freeze the action, see the diver as they're entering the water. Or again, not many of my pictures I look at in black and white. I tend to be a colour person. I didn't come from a background of darkroom work and film days. So in digital, you start with colour and work from there, I guess. Whereas before pre-digital, you had quite a different approach. This is Tom Daly, who's one of the diving heroes in this country. And again, it was a concrete diving board. It's a dark grey wood ceiling in this particular venue, which is the Olympic pool in London. So turning it to black and white really didn't make an awful lot of difference. And again, this is one of the shots that I wanted to get. There's a classic shot of the divers jumping off and spinning around with the spray coming off as they rotate in midair. But to do that, you've got to have the right background. You've got to have backlighting and a dark background. And the only place in the venue that this was going to happen was in front of this TV tower, which had been covered with a black cloth. So as you can see, there wasn't much of an opportunity. So I took a few hundred, I guess, pictures to try and get the one I wanted, which is that one. So the diver is jumping off the board. His hair is wet, and the spray is coming off. So again, one I was pleased with in the end, because that was one I wanted to go and get, and it did work. But some of these the same logic about finding the right background applies not just to sport pictures. This is a safari park in Spain. We're going to see a few pictures from around France and Spain at different points this afternoon. My wife and I have a motorhome, or an RV, as you may call it. So we've been lucky enough over the last few years, since we've retired from full-time jobs, to be able to go over to Europe for a few weeks at a time. This happens to be a safari park in northern Spain, but the access is great. You can drive around, you can stop, you can get out and photograph the animals. So these ostriches, by getting down a little bit lower and getting a slightly different background, there's a little bit of interest in the background, but nothing distracting. And this is again a before and after in terms of what I do in Lightroom. And my go-to in Lightroom is the texture and the clarity. Texture brings out all of the detail in the feathers. So I've ended up now with a picture where I've got a wide open aperture. So I've got a shallow depth of field, focus on the eyes, background drops out of focus, and I get the picture that I want. Same thing with sport, same thing with this type of animal. Same shot, same place, same background in a way, the giraffe having a bit of a munch. And the same thing there, wide open aperture, keep the background out of focus and draw your attention. And again, as humans, we will always tend to look at eyes first. So you can't really get away from that one. It follows you around the room. And this is one instance where actually the background did work in my favor. This was the finals of an national indoor hockey competition. And the sponsors were Jaffa, who sell orange juice and oranges. And one of their advertising hoardings had these two kids with oranges to their eyes. So it's more of a journalistic photograph, a slightly humorous one, but obviously watching the bloke play his hockey. So use your technology. This is really about what we do with our cameras and how we do it. And this is the boring, nerdy bit. That's just the next two slides. So it depends what size screen you've got as to what you can see. So I can see everybody leaning forward trying to have a look. So I'll read it through. But basically, this is me looking through, I don't know, a few 100,000 pictures on, well, not 100,000, a few tens of thousands of pictures on Lightroom, where you can analyze what shutter speed you're using. And looking at this, we've got nearly 30,000 pictures I've taken at 1,000th of a second, something over 15,000 at an 800th of a second, and something over 10,000 at a 1250th of a second. So my go-to shutter speed is 1,000th of a second. If I want to freeze motion, if I want to freeze football players, rugby players, any sort of fast-moving action, runners, I will start at 1,000th and work from there. So you can see that there's a range of other shutter speeds, but the vast majority of what I do is in and around 1,000th of a second. And in terms of aperture, by far and away, the majority of my pictures that I take are f2.8, because my three main lenses, my holy trinity of Nikon Pro lenses, are all f2.8. And my long zoom is a 200 to 500, which is a 5.6. So the next most popular is 5.6. I'm just gonna keep beating this camera up until it works. In half time, I'll change over. So yeah, the most popular shutter speed will always effectively be wide open, and I will again work from there in terms of what I'm doing when I'm taking my photography. And I'm not afraid of high ISO because I'm working in dark gyms, dark sports halls a lot of the time. So this is 25,600 ISO. That's that image processed in Lightroom, which is pretty good. I've recently bought the Nik Denoise AI, which is an even better bit of software. So if you look at that in that, and I've got that on my big, whatever it is, 27, 28-inch monitor, there is no grain. I could print that out A3 and you wouldn't see anything. So that's at 25,000 ISO. I would say don't be afraid of using high ISO if it means you keep your shutter speed up. And we'll be seeing some table tennis shots later on, which are incredibly dark venue, but I need to keep the shutter speed high. And the way to do that is to ramp the ISO up. And again, this is 6400 ISO. This is a hoverfly. While we were locked down, and literally we couldn't get out except for half an hour walk a day, I'd fortunately bought some extension tubes just after Christmas and never used them, and they just sat there. And it's like, oh, here we go. I can't do sport photography. Let's find something else that moves. And there's a hoverfly. So again, high shutter speed, get rid of the any sort of grain with the denoise, and ends up with pictures that I'm happy with. High shutter speed, so that the maximum shutter speed on my camera is an 8,000th. But again, because I'm shooting wide open with a lot of my shots, if I'm at 2.8 to get the background out of focus, I need to have a very high shutter speed to freeze the action. And even down at 64 ISO, I end up with a high shutter speed because it's so bright. Doesn't often happen in this country, but it does. And this is one for the nature guys among you. Although we live in the middle of London, our house is next door to a primary school. And 6 o'clock one morning, about a month ago, there's this banging going on outside, woke us both up. I looked out the window and there's this woodpecker, a greater spotted, I think it is, greater spotted woodpecker, which are not that common. There's obviously one lives around here somewhere, and it's banging on this dead tree trunk outside about 20 feet away. And as it happens, I got my camera and a 200-500 lens are kept in the bedroom. So this is shot through dirty windows, I'm afraid, but it was the best I could do. At 1,000th of a second, that's my default shutter speed. But the scary thing is when you look at this one, this is 1,000th of a second, but a woodpecker's head isn't stopped by 1,000th of a second exposure. So I have no idea. I can stop a running athlete at 1,000th of a second. I can stop a motorbike at 1,000th of a second, but I can't stop a woodpecker. So God knows what happens to their brains when they're going backwards and forwards, hitting that wood, because their heads are moving seriously fast. Again, wide aperture. So these are red kites. There's a place over in Wales near where my brother-in-law lives where they feed them every day. So you can pay a few pounds and go in there and take pictures of them. But by using the maximum aperture, 5.6 on my long telephoto, I can separate the birds. So the front one is in focus and the back ones are out of focus. So if I didn't shoot it at 5.6, you'd have all the other birds in focus, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to try and get some separation between the one at the front and the rest of them. So what maximum aperture for that one. Same thing here. We are very fortunate because we're not too far from a place called Richmond Park, which is one of the largest royal parks in London and has two different herds of deer, or two herds of different sorts of deer. Sadly for us, if we put deer pictures into the camera club competitions, they will generally speaking not get good marks because the judges in South London see so many deer pictures. But this is where if I'm doing this talk in person, this is where I do my joke. So there's a joke coming up now, guys. So are you ready for this one? So does everyone know what you call a deer with no eyes? The answer is no idea. So when I went to this particular venue, I only had one idea of what I was going to take, which was a one idea. So this is the differential focus that I'm talking about. So we get the animal in focus, we've got out of focus in front, out of focus behind, which gives us the separation and keeps the point of interest where we want it. This section is called Use Your Technology, and this is about using remotes. And this is a GoPro picture. So I was shooting some downhill mountain biking. I didn't really want to put my few £1,000s worth of Nikon and lenses in in harm's way, just in case these guys were going to go off track a bit. So I had got my GoPro with me. I stand the GoPro up on a little tripod and I control it from my phone. Very simple. And actually, to be fair, I've got a little Panasonic Compact, which I can do the same thing with. And to be fair, we can do the same thing now with a lot of our DSLRs if we choose to do so. But with these guys hurtling down the mountain at 30 miles an hour or more, I wasn't going to risk it. But it means you can, I've got a really wide angle on this one because that's the way I can set the GoPro up, take lots of pictures. And the picture is 12 megapixel. It's as good as my phone. It's still worthwhile. It's still a worthy picture. And the same thing, same setup. This was actually my dad's back garden. He just had an operation, had a heart valve replaced, and back at home convalescing. So to try and get him interested in something, we said, okay, look, if I put this camera out here, so we put the camera out next to his bird feeder. We sat inside with the iPad and pressed the button and ended up taking the pictures. So it isn't just about sport. There's a bit of wildlife there, but use the technology. It's incredible what we've got nowadays. And this is exactly the same thing. This is over in Tuscany, in Italy. I wanted to take pictures from the poppies. I mean, this isn't a great picture, but it's really to illustrate the point where I couldn't get down amongst the poppies. And even if I tried using the flip-up screen on my DSLR, it was moving the poppies around too much and I couldn't really see. But again, I put the GoPro on the end of a monopod, shoved it in amongst the poppies, nice and small, looked on my phone and took the picture. So in a way, I'm not talking rocket science here, but if there's a remote, maybe there's an opportunity to use it. And this isn't even about use your technology as much as have your technology on you. We were sat in France, we've been driving through France and stopped for a glass of wine at a little bistro beside a little park somewhere, and there's this whooshing noise, and they inflated this hot air balloon next to us, which then took off and flew right above us. And this actually was the very first picture that I ever put into a camera club competition, not many years ago. But if I hadn't had my camera with me, I couldn't have got the picture. So it's the old thing, we should always have a camera. I guess now we've got our phones which serve the purpose, and I could have taken this one with my phone if, wherever it was 6 years ago, phones have been up to it. And this I stumbled on this one. I was actually, to be fair, I had my camera because I was going to take pictures of some skateboarders, but the skateboarders were rubbish that night. They didn't want to play ball with the cameraman, so that's fair enough. So I wandered off around London and stumbled on these guys who are basically playing with fire. There's a group of them who get together and do tricks. They're sort of circus artists some of the time, but they like to get out there as a group. And these guys were throwing holy powder, the coloured powder that they throw at each other, whilst they were playing with the fire. So I ended up with a couple of pictures. Didn't have a tripod with me. I think these are at a 40th of a second. Needed a bit of work in Lightroom to take the very, very contrasty, to bring the blacks up and take the whites down. But I've got a couple of pictures that, again, have done very well for me in the camera club. The mere fact that I had my camera on me is what's made the difference. And this is really about use your technology in terms of your motor drive. So starting from number 524, I think there's 13 pictures where I've shot them. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of different Nikon bodies. So one is the D850, which takes about 5 or 6 frames a second, but has a large sensor on it. The D500 is a crop sensor, which gives me greater reach and gives me 10 frames a second. But when you're shooting something like canoeing, you don't know where the picture is going to be. So just take a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. I come back usually with 1,000+ pictures from an event like this. Yes, you've got to go through them, but you'll end up with the picture that you're looking for. Darts. So I went to the finals of one of the 2 big UK darts competitions. Got a press pass for that. And again, this one is, I say use the technology. This is wide open. There's a big thing in this country at the moment with women playing darts. That's me turning the camera on and off again. Sorry about that. women playing darts. So what we tend to find is that something with the point of difference is what's going to appeal. So this was just to illustrate the rings and the jewelry and the fingernails is an unusual sight when shooting darts. High shutter speed, we want to get the action. So stop the action mid-flight. Slow shutter speed, where we see his arm moving. And this really was to illustrate the fact that they stay incredibly still while they throw the dart. The only bit that moves is their arm. In camera, multiple exposure. If you've got the facility, have a little look at it, see what it can offer you. So there's 4 pictures here, which just show the action as he's throwing the dart. Again, St. Paul's, and this is use your technology, use your phone. This picture has done very well for me in a camera club competition. It's what we call the wobbly bridge. So it's a footbridge over the River Thames leading to St. Paul's. It has a glass side to it holding up the handrail on one side. So this is just get down low and just look for the reflection. I've put a texture on it in Snapseed. So this is taken on the phone and processed in Snapseed, which is my go-to processing when I'm doing anything on the phone. There's a bit of vignette on there as well. I've increased the contrast. I printed that out a bit bigger than A4, mounted it up, and it got a 10 out of 10 at the Camera Club. So don't be afraid to use your phone and the technology that you've got. And this, again, is taken with the phone. We have a thing called the Docklands Light Railway in London. This is a famous station called Canary Wharf. The nice thing about the Docklands Light Railway is there's no driver. So you get to sit at the front and you can play trains, which any good person would want to do, I think, want to drive the train. So using an app called Slow Shutter, you can simulate a slow shutter on your phone. Again, I've put it into Snapseed and processed it. And again, that's one that I can print off quite happily at bigger than A4, just using the phone. And this is from a trip to Iceland, which I took in February. I don't normally do landscape. I wanted to do landscape, have a go at it. Nikon were running a trip to Iceland. I think there were 7 of us plus 2 trainers or people to show us where to go and what to do. And this is a phone picture, but this is a panorama on my iPhone. And this has actually ended up bigger than my 45 megapixel DSLR. So there's about 48 megapixels on this panorama. I put it into Lightroom, done a little bit of processing, but for me, you couldn't get a better picture. I didn't want to change lenses in the middle of black sand, which is scary when it gets inside your camera in Iceland. So you have to be very careful where you change lenses. And I got my 24-70 on to get a wider angle. I just used the phone. And this one, which I will end the first half with, was again is in Iceland and was shot out the window of the car using the phone as we were driving along. I've processed it a little bit in Lightroom, but it's a phone picture. Use your phones, use your technology. The different opportunities that we've got now with compacts, with phones, with DSLRs gives us a huge range and a huge opportunity to get out there and take different photos. We've always got a camera on you. So I'm going to stop there at the end of the first half, go and top a cup of tea up. Any questions from you guys at the moment?
I have one.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're working with fire and water, which I notice you do a lot, do you shoot brighter and then tone the exposure down in editing, or do you shoot dimmer and then tone it up because there's like highlights and other things
Right.
to work with?
I tend to shoot to the left. So I tend to shoot dark because if you've got a highlight, there's nothing you can do with it. Once it's white, it's white. So whereas in Lightroom and with the current sensors that we've got on our cameras, it's easier to bring out the darks and get the detail out than it is to go the other way around.
For most of your action photography, how do you focus? Do you use, I mean, which of the autofocus Do you use a wide? Do you use a zone? Do you use a spot? How do you do that?
I will usually use, on the Nikon, it's D9 or D25. So I will have a, not spot focus, but I will have a small area focus, and I will move that around to start the shot and then follow on from there. Occasionally, I've tried what's called 3D on the Nikon, where it will follow focus, but it follows focus using color and I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's not great unless you've got a particularly outstanding subject. If you've got someone wearing a bright pink shirt against a dark background, it will follow them around. But it's not as good as the new mirrorless cameras. The new mirrorless cameras, I have had a play with the Sony D9 and the Nikon, what do you call it, Z6, Z7, and they are a step up in terms of how they track focus, particularly the Sony with its face focus, face following and eye tracking. Nikon have that as well, and I'm sure Canon do as well. But I tend to have D9 is my default, where I will choose a small area of focus and get the subject in that area and then follow it around from there.
Okay, thank you. I assume you're using something like that for the deer head shot where the foreground and the background was out of focus, but the head was in perfect focus.
That's it. Yeah, just get the eye. Again, if it's something like wildlife, it's the eye. If it's an athlete, it's the face. Get that in focus, and that's all you're after. That's cool. All I want to do is get that bit in focus. And in a way, I don't want anything else in focus, if you see what I mean.
Got it.
And to be fair, sometimes I fall into the trap of shooting everything at 2.8 or 3.5 and not getting enough in focus, if that makes sense. So sometimes I really should be shooting 5.6 or 7.1 to get more. But that, in a way, that's why I tried doing things like landscape, because it takes me out of where, in a way, I've ended up with my comfort zone is shooting sport, and I'm now trying to do more as well, to shoot other things.
Good stuff.
Thank you. Right, I'm just going to go and top the tee up. I'll be back in a couple of moments, and then I'm going to swap the camera over as well, so we can use a different webcam. That one won't keep freezing. I'll be back in a second.
So Ray, you're not topping your tee up?
There's stuff that I can't take. I'm nursing a replacement knee right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I can't even get out and walk and take pictures.
Wow.
Sucks.
Yeah. I've been missing the beach. Went over to Sea Point and got a traffic ticket from parking in the wrong place, but been missing A1 up along the New Hampshire coast. I wish they'd open it back up.
Oh, yeah. Have you tried Salisbury?
No, I haven't been down to Salisbury. I mean, like that's over the border, right? In germ-infected Massachusetts, or?
Yes. Just over the border.
just over the border, right? The wind's probably blowing it across the border anyway, right? It's very funny. I used to work for an insurance company, and it was odd. The insurance rates, automobile insurance rates, for folks that live in New Hampshire, varied by how close you got to the Massachusetts border. They went up the closer you were to the Mass border.
Oh, wow. Life goes on. I had to drive to different locations where I could shoot right out of the car window.
Well, that works.
Yes, it does. I got a number of killdeer shots.
guarantee not to fall apart now, not to freeze. I'll go back to share screen now.
Yeah, Iceland's on my bucket list one of these days, but I want to get
Oh,
up either there or Finland. I really want to see the Northern Lights, and there are
Oh,
a few places around where you can really get a good chance of seeing them.
we were so lucky. It was, again, have a look at my website. It just happened. We had 3 nights of Northern Lights, but equally, there was one day where we were in the hotel and there was like a little annex with about 8 bedrooms that we were in, and it was about 30 feet from the annex to the main building, and the wind was blowing at over 100 miles an hour. It was on Iceland have got this amazing weather forecasting because it is so mad. It was 116 mile an hour gusts, and we couldn't get from the annex into the main building to get breakfast. We had to wait for about half an hour until there was a little lull between gusts, and we clung onto each other and just ran across. And we couldn't go shooting that day at all. We just spent the whole day in the one room in the hotel, just because it was, it was great. But yeah, Iceland is surreal, absolutely surreal.
I'm confused. Are you trying to talk me into going or out of going?
No, into going. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay.
But I mean, what I would say is the great thing for us to say there were 7 people who paid our money, and the Nikon tour that we were on. So we had a guy who I know very well, who is the chief Nikon trainer in the UK, and we had a guy who is one of the top Iceland guides. He's from the UK, but he goes, a number of times every year. So they know the place like the back of their hand, and how to get the best out of it. And it was great having that. I mean, that's what you pay the money for, really. It worked really well. And a number of people have already booked to go back on the same tour next year.
Cool.
So, shall I carry on? Can you? Right. I don't.
Sounds good.
Are you seeing me or are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Yes. Right. Okay. Can you see processing?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Off we go. Processing. This is not step by step. This is not what I do by processing. This is more before and after, just to show you what I get out of the picture. So this is back in that wildlife park. And again, this is where I've done my scouting. I found this white eagle thing with the bad hairdo and thought, great, there's going to be a picture there. So I've moved round to try and find the black background, the dark background, so that I'm giving myself a chance where the bird is standing out against that. So that is out of camera picture. I've then gone into Lightroom and I've done texture, I've done clarity. I will have taken the whites down and the blacks up, or the shadows up, but kept the background dark. And I will have done some area localized retouching, or not retouching, but the eyes, for example. So I've gone into that eye that you can see and just brought the shadows right up. So that's where you end up.
Whoa.
So I cropped it, but you can see the eye now. So if we go back, that's the same picture, but that's just a bit of processing in Lightroom. I don't use Photoshop hardly ever. I mean, the only time that I would tend to go to Photoshop if there's a bit of cloning, but because I'm coming at sport from a fairly journalistic point of view. If you're Getty, you cannot remove anything from the background. That's not telling the truth. So I tend to take that approach with my photography. In other words, I want to get it right while it's in the camera in terms of the image. And okay, I don't mind working on the image to get more out of it, but I won't fiddle around with it, if that makes sense. This is one which I processed on my phone. So this is the shot taken with the DSLR. I will then Wi-Fi or Bluetooth it to my phone. I then process it in Snapseed, and send it off to the Sport on Spec guys, because this was an event in London that was going on for the week and they wanted to help promote it. So you can see there's the spots of light behind, which I have got rid of. I've cropped it, I've brightened it, and have ended up with that. And that's just done on the phone. And Snapseed is a Google bit of software that was originally written and developed by Nick. And Google bought Nick really just to get Snapseed. They then gave Nick away free, the whole software package for a while, and you can still get it free before it's been sold on to someone else. I don't know who it is now. But you can now pay again for the full Nick package, which is continually being updated. But in terms of the phone, the stuff I can process on it, it's absolutely brilliant. Get loads out of a picture. This is the nearest Sean that I get to what you do. 2 wheels rather than 4. Bit of motocross, and again, this is in processing. So what do? I love that picture because it's so in your face, but is it even more intriguing, shall we say, in black and white? And I don't know what the answer is. But as I said, a few of my pictures are in black and white. When I was at one of the canoeing events, I was chatting to the guy who was their official photographer for that particular occasion. And I said, "Oh, what do you normally do then?" And he said, "Oh, we've got a boat down on the coast, a rib, a twin engine rib, and we shoot yachts mainly." So he's a professional yacht photographer. So I've got this incredible, powerful rib, which I said, "Oh, can I come along one day?" And he said, "Yeah." So this is a thing called the Fastnet race, where yachts come from all over, actually, to be fair, from the States as well as Europe, to race from the Isle of Wight right down into the Atlantic and then back again. And this is one of the pictures where we were circling this yacht that was banging through the water. But this one does work in black and white. If anything, it's over processed, but that's more about trying to get the impact out of the spray. But one of the few that I've turned to black and white, which I think benefits from it. Now again, this was a meeting. You may have heard of Tower Bridge in London. It's the one with the big walkway at the top and goes up. So I had a meeting with some guys just round the corner from Tower Bridge, but I knew I'd be there at sunset. So I thought, oh great, I'll take along a little Joby tripod or something and just take a few pictures of the sun setting. So the tall building in the middle is called the Shard. For a while it was the tallest building in Europe. And the building, the sort of circular building, is the Mayor's office, the Mayor of London. So it has sort of some meaning for Londoners. So that was the sunset I ended up with. That's out of camera. But putting it into Lightroom, I moved the white balance. And I've ended up with that. Now, okay, it's fake, it's over the top. The River Thames is not really that purple as it is in the bottom right. This is really for illustrations purposes. Just play around with the white balance. You can, with a sunset, you can move it where you want. No one knows. And the point of this picture actually is that I then sold it to the guys I just had the meeting with, because they wanted a picture of the area for their website. So when I say sold it, they bought me a nice lunch, but you know, it was still worth having. This is under the processing section, but is also go with your mistakes, because this is a complete and utter screw up basically. I'd obviously had the camera on multiple exposure, in camera multiple exposure. So I think there's 5 exposures there. So I can't remember what I was doing, but I must have picked this body up and this was the opening of a local skate park, and ended up, this is the camera, so it's straight out of camera shot. But again, for me, Lightroom, put it into Lightroom, enhance texture, clarity. In this case, what else was I doing? Dehaze. It's the dehaze on this one that's made the difference, and that's where we end up. So that's the same shot. We can now see the guy's head. We can see, and for me, that actually epitomizes skateboarding. And it's a mistake, but it shows the action. And yeah, go with it. Look at everything that comes out the back of your camera, and don't delete all of your screw ups, because somewhere in there could be a good picture. This was some motocross that we stumbled on while we were in France. And because I've now got a press card, it's great. I can just go up to the guys and in my best French say, hello, please can I come in? I've got a press card. I want to take some photographs and I'm English. And they said, yeah, okay. So this again is just getting the best out of it. This would have been dehaze, would have been the main function that I would have used on this one. It really enhances the crispness and the clarity. And again, judges and humans love odd numbers, and 3 is a popular one. So we've got 3 quad bikers all in a row. And this is one that I did try and get. I could see that the sun was coming around towards the end of the event, and there was an area where the guys would come over that jump with lots of dust being thrown up by the wheels, obviously more by the quad bikes than by the motorbikes. But by being fairly aggressive, we end up with that. And okay, I accept it's not real, but it has impact. And again, if you're putting a picture into a camera club competition, something that has impact is potentially going to score you more than that, which is a boring picture. So
are these taken with your 500 millimeter?
Sorry, there what?
Well, which lens was this? Was this like a 500 millimeter?
No, this is the 7200.
Okay.
My go-to would tend to be the 7200 first and foremost. And again, this is one of the beauties, one of the reasons that I bought the D850. Sorry, get rid of that. One of the reasons I bought the D850, which has got the 45 megapixel sensor on it, is that I can crop stuff out of it. So although I'm only using maybe a 200 millimeter lens, I can just take the middle 25% of that and still get enough pixels to work with. So in a way, I'm compensating by not having the lens by having the bigger sensor.
Okay.
This actually was taken with my D600. So this is the canoeing event that I talked about earlier. And then this is a picture that you saw at the beginning. But what I would say here is don't be afraid to crop. So you can see there the amount, and that's a 24 megapixel original, which is there. That's 24 megapixels. That's how much I cropped out of it. When you guys are putting pictures into your camera club for a competition, and presumably you have projected competitions, what's the resolution that you have to use?
Well, we basically just ask for full size. We don't really require a certain resolution.
All right, okay.
Because yeah, we basically just do it with a Lightroom slideshow. We don't actually do competition in this club.
Oh,
it's more of just an open critique.
Right. Okay. So again, within the UK, there's a very strong element of competition within internal competitions within a club. So every year we will have 4 rounds of print competition in our club and 4 rounds of digital projected competition. So if we're projecting an image, most camera clubs in this country would work 1400 wide or 1600 on the long dimension, 1600 pixels. So if you're 1600 pixels on your long dimension, you're really only looking at a 2 megapixel image in total. So why not crop in that sense? So if you crop, you still end up with that. And I could print that, I can project that, and that still works. So I would just say, don't be afraid to crop. So this is me and my weird and wonderful sports. Because as I said, I can't get into all the big sports. I'm a sports tart. I will do anything. If it involves some sort of competition, I'm there. So when we're in France, there's Concorde de Cocarde, which is also called Course Camarguaise. And this is held in a bull ring in southern France. It doesn't involve bulls, it involves cows. But they're from the same breed that the Spaniards breed their bulls for bullfights. And there will be about, I think it's about 20 minutes where there's 6 guys in the ring and a mad cow there. And that's how close you are. In terms of, I think we paid €5 to get in, I don't know, which is about $5, I guess, to get into this event. And that's how close you are in terms of access. And there is one of the cows. They do tape over the very pointy bits at the end of their horns. But the idea of the event is that the 6 guys in the ring will try to grab the rosettes from between the horns of the cow. So you can see there's one yellow one, and then there's a green one at each side, and a yellow one in the middle. And they're just sort of taped on with loose elastic. And the guy who grabs the rosette wins a prize. And I still don't know what the prize is, but it made for some great photography. But this is one of these things where it's a weird sport, it's a minority sport, it's a sport you've never heard of, but it still makes for some great imagery. This is poor Kevin. Kevin's getting rather beaten up by this cow. And you'll see Kevin again in a minute. His mates are rushing to him. They're about to try and help him up, distract the cow, whatever is necessary to get him out of his predicament. But they don't take any prisoners, these animals. They run around at full speed. There is no stopping them. You just got to, I mean, I don't know if they get paid for doing this exactly or what it is, whether it's done for the macho stuff, you get the girl, or what it is. But there's Kevin. He'd already, when he was being chased up the wall, he'd already had his trousers ripped on the horns of one of these animals. And you can see they'd managed to draw blood, but he carried on. But the picture that's been most successful for me is this one. Where again, this was, inevitably, these pictures are all luck, not judgment, I guess. But again, motor drive running, the guy ended up with his t-shirt getting caught on the horns. The shot before this is looks gory because the animal's actually treading on him. So I guess he had some nasty bruises afterwards. But this has done very well for me in camera club competitions around the region. They have another form of bullfighting in southern France. So that was where they're trying to grab the rosette. This is a slightly different region of France and is what I call bull swerving. And the idea is that it's actually a cow will run along down the arena. In this instance, it's being restrained by a rope, so it doesn't go too mad, but sometimes they do it without the rope. And it's the most artistic swerve that wins. And I don't know how on earth you judge the most artistic swerve. It's not like ice skating or something where you count the number of 12s and get marked accordingly. But they also jump over them. So they stand in the middle of the arena, they shout at the animal until it starts rushing towards them, and then they jump over into a somersault. When they really want to show off, they tie their legs together before they do it. So keep your eyes open for some weird and wonderful sports when you're out there. Now here's another one that you nod your heads if you're familiar with croquet. No, oh, we've got a couple of people who are. So this is the British Open Championships, which every few years is held in London. And this is a very posh country club, although it isn't a country club, it's right in the middle of town. And guys flew in certainly from Canada, from the States, from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and all over the UK to take part in this. And I'd seen some croquet pictures that intrigued me. And I thought, I want to go and take pictures of this. And this took me a lot of effort in terms of emailing the Croquet Association and in the end, they said, well, yeah, we'll let you in, but Hurlingham Club have got to let you in as well. And they said, well, what are you using the pictures for? And anyway, jumped through all the hoops and ended up taking these pictures. And I like this one. Again, there's a sense of mystery. We know it's a woman playing. Pink mallet, skirt on, but we can't see her. But she's playing exactly the same level that the guys are. It's not a sexist sport. There's not his and hers. Everybody plays croquet the same. Oops. But they do get into some funny positions. So this is where they have to be ultra accurate in terms of lying down and lining up the balls to make sure they go through the hoops without being impeded. I call this one the meticulous exponent. And again, it's done quite well for me until one judge looked at it and said, well, if you're going to set a picture like this up, you really don't want the mallet there. If you move the mallet out the way, the picture will be a lot better. So he marked it down. Now, I'm sorry, but in the middle of the biggest competition in the UK, and one of the people who plays croquet for England, because he's got his England kit on there, I'm not going to go up to Mr. Hopgood and say, could you just move your mallet out the way, mate? I want to take your picture. So we have to go with what it is. But again, it's created some different imagery for me. So this is back to the picture that sort of sat there in the back of my mind as to the sort of graphic imagery that I like in terms of table tennis. And there's one of my versions of it. I did do this one in black and white, but that's the same sort of thing in color. And this is, actually some of these are ping pong, not table tennis. There's a very fine divide between the two. Ping pong is sandpaper bats. Table tennis is rubber bats. Same table, same net, same balls. But if you have a sandpaper bat, you don't put as much spin on it, so the rallies last longer, which is why that's televised, whereas ping pong is televised because there's longer rallies. Again, you get to see some interesting faces as they concentrate on the ball. And this again is where I've worked around. I found a bit of black cloth, which was set up for the television guys. Very high ISO because it's so dark in there, wide open 2.8 to try and get as much light into the camera as I can. But you need a high shutter speed to freeze the action. This is a guy who won it last year, and he always pulls the most horrendous face whenever he serves. He won it a few years before. And then there's always the classic ball on nose picture. So they always look like a clown. If you get the ball in, again, you have to take lots. But again, why not? You know, it doesn't cost you anything. All it costs you is a bit of time when you're looking through them afterwards to reject all the ones and find the one that you do like. This is squash. So again, obviously I am aware that squash is played fairly extensively over in the States because one of these guys is a pro at a New York club most of the time. And this is where they have a glass court and we get to sit in front of them. So they're hitting the ball into the wall above our heads, which really seriously does your head in. And they're hitting the ball at 150 miles an hour towards you. It's great when the people, when you get the Getty guys who only come along for the final and they're not used to it, you see them recoil every time the ball hits the wall above their heads. But again, you have to take a lot of pictures to get the one where the ball is coming towards you. And this picture has been did well for me in Camera Club. And again, what we have is inter-club competitions. So that will work within the region, within South London, we'll have inter-club competitions, and then within the county, we'll have county competitions. And then the club that comes first or second in the county competition represents the county into the national competitions. So this picture has actually been used in the national competition because our club did quite well in the last couple of years. And that one is from earlier this year. This was the very last event that I got to go to before lockdown. So that one is called Eyeball because it's pretty much self-explanatory. Skateboarding. So there'll be a skate park somewhere. So even though we've had lockdown, there's still been kids using the local skate parks. This is one up in the middle of London, underneath the railway arches. But I went along one day with my remote flashes and I got lucky because this guy was there who was happy to pose for me. So I've got a couple of remote flashes, one to the left, one to the right. So they're set off when I press my shutter, and it hasn't quite worked because I've just lost the fingers at the very top. So it's not the perfect picture, but it did what I wanted it to. And here's another one. This is about the detail. This is, I call this one just about coping because the metal on the edge of the skate park is called the coping. So this one is really just about coping. And this was the first time we went out since we've been locked away. So a few of us went for a walk around the Olympic Park in London and ended up in a local park to that one where there was a skate park. And this guy was riding his bike around. And there's a picture that I've ended up with. But for me, I've turned it upside down just to make you look. You've got 3 different planes of activity going on there. And it's just, I prefer it that way up to the right way up, if that makes sense, because we're focusing on the shadow rather than anything else. So sometimes just look at a different point of view. Nothing special, but I've ripped into this one in Lightroom. I've really increased the contrast, really increased the clarity, and really increased the texture, so that you can see all of the graffiti that's been removed. Just makes for a more gritty image. And that's one that I took last week. The kids were out playing. So again, no special access, no nothing. You can just wander down there and get some impactful imagery. And again, I've walked around to make sure that there's nothing distracting in the background. You get kids sat on the edge of the pool, of the bowl, but I've worked on it to try and get just the subject that we want. Here's one you've never heard of: chess boxing. It is a sport. It's a minority sport. It's played occasionally in London. They put a chessboard in a boxing ring, and they play 3 minutes of chess. They then box for 3 minutes. They then have 3 minutes of chess. They then box for 3 minutes. And this is one where I'd got my GoPro on a clamp on the edge of the table. So with their permission, I was able to get inside the ring with them, even though I wasn't there. And again, take the picture remotely. But again, just amateur boxing. It's not actually about the boxing. It's about the fact that he's spraying his boxer down, refreshing him in between the rounds, and the black backlight has heightened the spray. One of my more successful canoeing pictures. Again, I've sharpened it up quite a bit in Lightroom on this one. I think it's a little bit over textured myself, but it does go down well with judges and with other members of the camera club. One of the important things I would say here is the action is much better coming toward you than away from you. And if you can get a face, and particularly an eye, we are drawn to humans' eyes. That's where we look first. So if this picture didn't have one of his eyes in it, it wouldn't work as well. But I still like the graphic image. And for me, that in a way says as much about canoeing as the previous one. Is he in control? Is it she, he? Are they in control? Are they out of control? Have they touched the bowl where they're not meant to? And this actually, I think, is probably my most popular picture on Instagram, which I put in the middle of our lockdown, and I just called it "The Only Way Is Up." And again, he's just making sure he doesn't touch that pole as he goes past it. But you can't see the canoe at all. It's completely submerged. All you see is the guy on the paddle. Back in the velodrome, you can make out the word London, just about. Again, the classic panning shot, slow shutter speeds. And again, I particularly like this one because of the shadow as well as the background. So it works on different levels for me, this one. And again, in the velodrome, where we have the 4 people in the team pursuit, accidents happen. And in this case, an accident did happen, but this comes back to taking lots of pictures. If I hadn't had the motor drive on as they were coming around the corner, I wouldn't have got the girl falling over. And this won me a diploma from a Spanish salon a few years ago. Obviously tickled their fancy. And again, velodrome, this is shot at the 6-day event where the lighting is terrible. It's disco lights and beer and party and DJ and track cycling. But in this instance, the very slow shutter speed, just picking out the one cyclist. I've sold prints of this a few times as a different sort of cycling picture. So a little bit more emotive than maybe what I would usually do. Kite flying competitions. So we went to France for the day. We're lucky because we have the Channel Tunnel, so we can go for 35 minutes under the English Channel and end up in France. And the World Kite Flying Championships was being held on a beach in northern France. And again, these guys were actually rehearsing in a separate bit of the beach where there was no distracting backgrounds. So I could stand behind them and take a shot of their 6 kites as they were doing an aerial ballet, which just worked quite well. Speedway. Again, this was something we stumbled on in our motorhome while we were wandering around France. Just saw adverts that said Speedway, so shot from the crowd. Again, a bit scary when all the gravel goes flying around, but if you find the right position, you can do it without getting your camera wrecked. And this is para-athletics. So we had the World Para-Athletics Championships held in the London Stadium last year, I think it was. This won me a medal in an international salon. What the category was for disability sport. So we have these 2 ladies running with both of them on 2 blades. And this is something which you guys are probably more familiar with than we are, lacrosse. It's only really played in public girls' schools in this country, whereas over there it's a proper sport played by both sexes at all sorts of high levels. But a few years ago we had the World Championships held here. So again, I just said, could I come along and take pictures? So this is Scotland against, I think it's Argentina, I'm not too sure. But again, it's first time I had ever seen the sport, first time I shot it. This is England getting firmly beaten by Canada. But this is the picture that I like best from that day, where they had an England under-19 team. And a bit like a lot of sports, they have a huddle at the beginning and the end. So again, it may be something you're more familiar with than I am, but the fact they all got together and with their sticks, what they call sticks, up in the air, made for a different picture. And it's one that wouldn't have been seen in this country at all, really. It's quite a different sort of picture. There we are, back on home turf for you guys. So I have shot what we call American football. Again, it's not played very often over here. This is Greenwich University team, and somebody that I know is their sort of tame photographer. And one occasion he couldn't make it, so he said, "Would I go along and shoot it?" Well, I'm a great fan of NFL, so I know enough of the rules to know what's happening and what's likely to happen. Whereas most people would look at it and wonder what on earth is going on. So at least I was aware that this sort of action could happen. But again, the pictures from this are not going to win me any awards anywhere, because for me, again, the background, the action's great, but the backgrounds don't make for a picture that is going to stand out in club photography terms anyway. Whereas rugby union, which is what we play without the pads, without the helmets, mano a mano, or in this case, woman a woman. So this is Women's International Rugby Union. So there's a little bit of elbowing going on there, which is all part of the fun. And this is how we score the tries. For us, when we have a touchdown, we actually have to touch the ball down. So I just love the differences. It's great. Rugby league, rugby union, NFL, the different origins, I guess, are the same. And the sports have evolved in different ways. So that's the classic try scoring shot. But again, for me, there's a lot more graphic imagery to be had, where the referee is just coming in at the side because he's spotted an infringement and he's got his finger up just to make a picture which has a point of difference about it. And the same here, we have, if you're not familiar with it, we have line outs. So if the ball goes out the side of the pitch, the game is restarted by throwing it in and they will jump to catch it. So this is the local rugby club in Beckenham in South London. And he's been hoisted up to try and catch the ball. And again, that's the same game at a different angle, different point of view, just the 2 players standing out. And the same sort of event, women's match, just highlighting how high they get by putting her against the sky. That's very much a classic rugby shot again. The guy scoring the try, the touchdown, with pretty much all the opposition trying to stop him and failing. And this picture has done very well for me. It happens to be rugby union, but in a way it could be any sport. He's obviously, this guy used to play full-back for England in rugby union. He's playing his club, the Harlequins here, and he's actually just checking out whether his teammates are all lined up as they should be. But that's done very well and won me a few things in the past. Surfing on the west coast of France, the World Surfing Championships comes round every year to that venue, and funnily enough, a couple of times in October we ended up on the coast in France taking pictures. This is John Florence from Hawaii, who has won it a couple of times. I think he's going to be one of your superstars at the next Olympics, because surfing is now in the Olympics. So keep a little eye out for John Florence, because he may well be representing you in the surfing over in Tokyo, assuming it all goes ahead next year. They don't have to do some mad things on surfboards. And this is Tough Guy. The original Tough Guy was started off in Wolverhampton, and it's quite interesting because someone who was at, I think he was at Yale, a British guy, came across for his sort of dissertation, came across to study the original Tough Guy event in Wolverhampton in the middle of the UK. That event still carries on. It happens at the beginning of February when there is snow on the ground quite often. Certainly ice has to be broken on the water before they swim through the lakes. And this is one of the marshals before the start, warming the crowd up. But these Tough Guy events are easy to get into. So if you're looking for a bit of sporting action, there's quite often good access to this sort of event. You can get these sort of pictures, which again have a point of difference and will stand out. These two guys go around every year in their dinner suits, and they're forever adjusting their bow ties. But again, it doesn't have to be about wider action. If you get close in, you get something that says as much about the event, thousandths of a second, as he stamps through the mud, and that's it. There's nothing fancy about that, but it actually says everything about the sport. And this again has won me a couple of things. I was in the right place at the right time. My friend who I went up there with was stood next to me, and he missed the shot, but that one did work for me. They jump over the straw, which has been set alight. Excuse me. And every now and then, you get one person who comes across and plays to the crowd rather than just jump through it. They'll do something fancy, which is exactly what this guy did. But it makes a great print, that one. This is some gymnastics held in London. And again, this is where part of my scoping out the venue pays dividends, because this was a double whammy, really. I worked out that I wanted to get him with the background rather than the crowd. I wanted to separate him from the crowd. So we have the access steps. So I lined him up with the access steps. But I then realized that actually the television cameras were in the same line of sight. So with a little nod and thumbs up at the television camera, I actually crouched underneath the TV camera while this particular competitor was doing his routine. And he got into this stand position, incredible strength. But they know where the TV cameras are, these guys. So he was actually looking at the television camera directly above my head. But again, it looks as though he's looking at me, and you get brownie points for the eye contact in this instance. Now, this is something that you should be familiar with, I guess, which is roller derby. Over here, it's an unusual sport. And I have to explain to people what goes on, but here we have the girl, and you may be aware that the circular bruises are called derby kisses, where they've been kicked or whatever, have come into contact, shall we say, with the other girl's wheels as they're taking part. So just makes for some great imagery. And there's two roller derby leagues in London. They have 2 or 3 teams each. They're really friendly, lovely girls, great tattoos, great attitude, great nicknames, great violence. It's lovely. As I say, really, there's only a couple of men's teams. I don't really know of any men's competitions, actually, to be fair, that happen. I couldn't find any. But again, we get some bruises on the legs, we get the tattoos, we get the roller skates, and it all makes sense. So again, different sorts of shots from the same venue. So here we have a panning shot as she's going round. This, I think, was at the end of one of the matches where they all high-five each other and go through each other's sort of arch there. And again, shoot from different angles. This is where I've put my camera on the floor. So I've got the floor in there, and I've found a place where there is a clear blue bit of wall behind. So we've got the action, we've got a slightly different angle. One of the big traps I think we all fall into is to shoot everything from 5'6", because that's where we hold our cameras, you know, give or take a bit, depending how tall we are. But the go-to place is like, why do we do everything from eye height? If we crouch down, if we get up, we can get some different angles and get some different shots out of it. Focus on the character. Again, you can see here, I'm shooting wider than I need to, so that I'm separating her from the background. And the same thing again there, the other direction. We can see what's going to happen. We can see where she's going. We can see what she's eyeing up. Just a study of a young lady. Again, we've got the referee in there. We're in the middle of the track as they go around. Nothing there is sharp at all, but we still get the sense of what's going on. And again, intensity. Her eyes are on the action, no question. A couple of fairly standard panning shots here, motocross. And again, with panning, what I would tend to do is start at the slowest shutter speed. So I'll start at maybe a 1/10 of a second, or an 1/8 of a second, a 1/10 of a second, a 15th, 20th, 25th. Just keep doing it until I reach the point where I start getting sharp pictures. And that's where I can stay. And obviously it depends on the sport and the distance you are away as to the speed that you'll go. For someone like Sean, who's shooting regularly, the same sort of event, I guess, in the same sort of venue, you can fairly dial in your settings and know where you're going to be. Is that right, Sean? Is that the sort of thing you do?
My space bar didn't work for some reason. No, not necessarily, because you know, depending on how the light changes throughout, you know, from moment to moment, if you have clouds that are rolling in and rolling out, I mean, your settings are going to be. I'm constantly changing settings. One of the things I love about my D500, and you probably do too, is where the ISO button is located.
Yep.
It's at the top, so you can just hold it down and change ISO on the fly. And yeah, because I'm working in high shutter speeds and in low shutter speeds as well, so ISO is always a big variable. But yeah, I wish I could just set it and forget it. There's days that I consider going into a program mode and I just refuse to do it. But
again, I'm usually shooting manual. Sometimes if the light isn't going to change, I can maybe shoot shutter aperture priority. But in a way, if I'm on manual and like you, I'm moving either exposure compensation or ISO, which are in the same sort of place. It's easy to do, and you just get used to it. That's one of the classic things is know your equipment. You should be able to work your camera in the dark.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one of the things that I run into shooting cars particularly is that they're reflective. So a white car, the camera is going, or a light colored car, the camera is going to give you a darker exposure for that in any of the auto modes, whereas a dark car is going to overexpose to compensate for that. And so I really can't work in program modes. And if you're working with cars and things like that, you really can't.
Yep.
So
yeah, I get that. So again, classic again, back to my usual thing, shooting wide open, getting the background out of focus, getting those people behind, so we've got the sense of the event. This guy's in the lead and the others are following him. This is where, again, change your angle, get down low. If I didn't get down low, I wouldn't have that grounding. And one thing I have found is if you've got these bikes jumping over, unless you've got something to ground them with, it's just someone in the air. It doesn't okay, if they're doing tricks in the air, that's something different. But if these guys are just doing jumps, you need to have something to relate it to, which is the ground. And he's got a bit too close to the ground. So, and again, this is something that I've learned, I guess, is that at the start, you're more likely to have accidents than you are halfway through the race, because halfway through the race, everyone is spread out. At the beginning, they're all bunched up. So if something like this is going to happen, it's going to happen. And this is the first bend after the start. And there's usually somebody who ends up in some sort of difficulty. He got up and carried on, so that it was fine. So again, this is the 7200, just taken. Fortunately, there's a bend, so they're not going to run into me. But this was a nice one actually, because I just wandered up one Saturday morning and was taking pictures of these guys on this downhill course, which is a little way away. This is when my dad had his heart operation, so he was recuperating and I was out for the day shooting these guys. And I put this on Instagram. I put a few of these on Instagram, and they contact. Oh, that's right. It was a few months later. I got a message through Instagram saying, I am the sister of one of these guys, and I want to get him a print for his birthday. I want to do a canvas print. So she bought one of these pictures off me. I think might have been this one, which she then had printed up as a canvas print and gave him to him as his birthday. So it's like really nice that we can put things out there and they can still be picked up by people who are involved. This is a GoPro one. So again, this is where I've got the camera actually underneath where they're jumping over. Again, using the technology. This one should make you smile. This is the Diamond League. Again, I got a press pass for this, so we're inside the Olympic Stadium in London. Position myself along with lots of other photographers at the end of the hurdles, and they're jumping off towards us. And this was used by our camera club as one of the 10 pictures in an inter-club competition. So we each put 8 pictures. We each put 8 pictures in, maybe 4 clubs, and a judge will look at them, give them all a score. And he looked at this one and said, oh, love this picture. Yeah, really good. Love the eye contact. Great picture. But the 2 girls on the left, their hands are overlapping. So I'm going to take marks off for that. It's like, what? And that's for me, as something of a photojournalist, I wouldn't normally do that. I wouldn't normally look at that picture and think, oh, there's an issue there. So in photographic purist terms, there isn't any separation. In photojournalism terms, it says everything. So we did actually, as a club, win that particular semi-final, and that picture was retouched before it went into the next one. So even though it was against my better principles, we still decided that it was probably worth not riling a judge by having something like that offend them. Same event, different year actually, this one. But again, one thing that I tend to do when I'm processing is I favour a vignette. So it draws the eye in to the middle of the picture, which is where the action's happening. So I'll quite often just put a gentle vignette on around the edges, which again saves distraction on the edges of the frame and tends to concentrate your eye into the middle. Cyclocross, and this is one of the few events where I could use fill-in flash. Generally speaking, I would say you don't use flash when you're shooting sport. You can easily upset and offend the athletes. Was shooting some basketball once, and someone came along who'd obviously not done it before and was just stood on the edge of the court, flashing away. Really did upset them somewhat. So, but this is just a bit of fill-in flash. But this again is what I would call a standard picture. I like it and it works. But for me, I think this girl looking completely and utterly worn out at halfway, and she actually stopped halfway through the event. She just couldn't carry on. And again, I've desaturated that a bit just because she's a bit desaturated as well, I think. And again, one I've turned to black and white just to give a bit more impact. We've lost the sky completely. And again, you can see how steep the hill is as she's cycling around. We're onto something again. I think you guys have this in the States a bit more than we don't really have this in the UK. There's a little bit of trotting in Wales, but this is taken in France, where trotting is very popular. It's really about the betting, I think, rather than anything else. But everyone goes there and has a fun day out for very little money. So again, a lot of them take place on grass in sort of next to some faded chateau, which is great for photography. Some of them are on cinder tracks or gravel tracks. Sitting behind a horse when it's kicking that lot up is something else. So we're coming to the end now, just the last two or three. Again, this was where I got great access to a Diamond League para athletics event. We happened to be in Italy at the time, but this girl's been to Rio. She actually was from the States. She'd flown over from the States to Italy to take part. So she's on her blade and her leg. But she's been to Rio. She's been there and done that. And this again, this is one that means more to me than anything else. This guy was actually breaking the world record, and I like the picture, but again, the background doesn't work somehow. It doesn't. I couldn't get to a place where the picture was going to work. So that's one for me rather than for a competition. And I'm just going to end with a bit of a summary and some thoughts on shooting action. So as I've said, know your equipment and your software. You can get more out of it. The more you put in, the more you get out, I guess. So if you can work your camera blindfold, as Sean says, if you know where you can vary your ISO or your shutter speed or whatever it is, you'll be able to do it quicker and without thinking. Know your sport. If you know what's going to happen next, you can anticipate it. So for me, I love shooting different sports because for me, the excitement comes in getting the best out of where I am and what's going on in front of me. So something like when they're trying to get the ribbons off the front of those mad cows. It's like, what on earth is going on here? But you end up working out what's going on. Focus on focus. I guess Sean is going to nod on this one, but back button focus is the way to go. So if you are shooting sport or action, and that would include wildlife, nature as well, anything that maybe is fast moving. Back button focusing is where you separate the focusing function from your shutter release function. So normally, if you half press your shutter release, it will focus, and then you press all the way down to release the shutter. By separating the focusing function to using your thumb to get the focus, to acquire focus, and then your shutter release, you separate the two functions, which gives you a big advantage. So I was dubious. I didn't used to do it when I first started shooting sport, and then I realized what it does for me. So increase your shutter speed. I've already said I shoot high shutter speeds. Increase your ISO if you're shooting in the night. Increase your burst rate. That's going to give you the best result you can. Increase your chances of getting a decent picture. I've just said avoid flash. There are circumstances where you can use flash, like I said, when I set it up with the skateboarders, or where your athlete or competitor is aware of what's going on. But generally speaking, if somebody is putting their heart and soul into the action, they don't want to be blinded while they're doing it. Shoot everything. Sometimes you can get great pictures of the crowd. Sometimes, like we saw with the tough guy, the details are what give you the impression of the sport. You can see more about the sport by shooting someone's foot going through a muddy puddle, perhaps, than by shooting somebody who themselves is just looking tired and covered in mud. Watch your backgrounds. That's where I started. Background, background, background. If your background is clean, then your subject will stand out. Towards, not away. This is where, again, normally you will get the best result by having someone coming towards you, having the face in the action. And again, that Sean would probably say, again, if you have a car coming towards you or across the frame, you'll learn more than if it's going away. be critical. I mentioned Bob Martin as the Sports Illustrated guy in Europe. He would say, or he has said, if you go to an event and you get a really good picture, it's like, oh wow, I've come away after that day and I've got a really good picture. Not good enough. Go back and get a great picture. If it's something that's on for 2 or 3 days, I will go for 2 or 3 days if I have that luxury of time and the opportunity. Because if I have got a good picture after the first day, I'm going to go back and look for something better. So be critical. Try and get the best you can. Change angles, high or low. I've mentioned it a couple of times. If you're looking down low, up at something with a wide angle lens, you'll get a lot more impact than if you're shooting everything, as I say, at 5'6". Shoot tight, crop tighter. Again, if you're shooting sport, it's all about the action. And okay, of course, there's case for wide angles, but usually it's about the action, and the action is what you're shooting. So that's what your picture is going to be about. Shoot, shoot, and shoot some more. We're in the wonderful age of digital where it doesn't cost us a thing. It costs us a bit of battery and then a bit of time looking at the pictures afterwards. But something like that canoeing, the majority of pictures, you've got someone's arm in front of their face. You've got some water in front of their face. So the picture isn't there. So you go and shoot 1,000 and end up with 20 good ones. So what? That's not a problem. So sorry to wake you, but that's it, folks. We've reached the end. So thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Any questions from anybody?
I saw that you used a lot of GoPro shots. What GoPro do you use exactly?
Oh, I think I've got a Hero 5. I guess any of the recent ones would do it. I mean, the reason that I bought it was that I was hoping to clamp it to the front of a canoe or a skateboard and shoot remotely as the athletes were doing the action. I found that generally speaking, that with the canoeing, it wouldn't work because you're using Bluetooth to communicate from your phone to the camera, and the distance is too great. For me, the best use of the GoPro has been to stand it on the ground close to the action and then shoot remotely with it. But although I've been using a GoPro, and yes, it's great, it's waterproof, it has lots of benefits. A lot of the modern compacts would do the same thing. So as I said, I've got a compact that cost about the same, which has got a better lens and a better resolution. But I could stand that on a little tripod and do exactly the same thing. So I guess a GoPro would be great if you want the weatherproofness. It's great at video. Obviously, there's lots of things it's great for. But I tend to use it as a little remote camera.
All right. Thanks.
Do you need to get releases from people?
Ah, right. Good question. If you're shooting editorially for a sport, then no, because it's being used in an editorial way, not in I'm not making money out of them for their image. I'm shooting the sport and the action, if that makes sense. If it gets a bit more difficult if I'm shooting championship rugby. So that's the level below the internationals. So I'll go and shoot a local rugby team. They are contracted to Getty to do their photography. So I can use their pictures, I can put them on the websites, but I can't sell them. We can use them to promote their sport, we can use them to promote their brand, we can use them to promote their club. But I couldn't, for example, that picture of the rugby player who's looking over his shoulder at night. I was at one point, oh great, I'll print one off and see if he wants to buy it. I'm not allowed to do that because I've shot the picture under the auspices of the club as an editorial picture, not as a portrait picture that I can sell. So it's a fairly subtle area, but just shooting pictures, unless I'm shooting pictures at the skate park, that's out in public. And in this country, I can shoot pictures in public without any problem.
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to using remote shutters as opposed to, typically your finger? I mean, do you use any of the other type shutters?
I haven't had to. And again, if I'm, so the classic use of the remotes is if you're shooting soccer, you'd put one with a wide angle behind the goal. So if there's a penalty or there's some action in front of the goal, you're sat further up near the corner flag. So every time you take a picture, you've got the remote shooting pictures as well. So that isn't a circumstance that I've found myself in. And in a way, because I'm not shooting these pictures in a way like Getty is, I'm shooting them largely for myself. I don't need to, I guess, is where I'm coming from. So the only remote bit I've done is what I said with maybe something like the GoPro. One of the things that I did try, and it didn't work very well, was the target shooting, the air pistols, which we saw at the very beginning. What I wanted to do was shoot from the target back towards the guys who are doing the shooting, because that's something you wouldn't normally see. So I suspended the GoPro from a wire, which was like halfway down the shooting lane, pointing back towards them. But so there was a remote in that instance, but it didn't work very well. But I will go back and do it with the compact camera, and I think that will work. So in that sense, yeah, that's taking me to a place that I couldn't go as a person standing there. So I haven't had to do it, but it's something that I will be doing at some point.
Okay, thank you.
So what I will say is have a look at my website. You will find, as I said, nearly 50 odd sports there, but you will also see some wildlife. You'll see a bit of street photography. You'll see, while in lockdown, you'll see a lot of photos in my back garden. A lot of little flying things. God, did we get bored? Some flowers. So, yeah, trying a few different soap bubble photography. Yeah, all sorts of different stuff. And there's a bit of landscape from Iceland. Their pictures I'm really pleased with. They came out very well. So it isn't just about sports. I do enjoy my photography, but this particular talk is all about sport. So hope you've all enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank
Yep,
Thank you
very
so much.
nice.
Thank you.
Got a lot of ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
All right. I guess that's it then. Andrew, that was really great. I enjoyed it quite a lot. As someone who works in the world of action photography, it's always interesting to see what other people are doing. So that shot of the guy from the back, the rugby player, was looking over his shoulder. That light was that's like magic. It was so nice.
Yeah, that's luck. You know, you can't control that. That's whatever the stadium gives you.
That's true, but you have to know what to do with it when it's given to you. And so there's a certain amount of luck that the light exists, but then a certain amount of just being able to control that light and do something with it. And you pulled it off. I thought it was really, really a great image. There's quite a few in there that I liked quite a lot. So I hope everybody got something out of this today, and maybe even if it's just a little bit of inspiration to head out and shoot your nephew or grandkid's little league game or something, and just get out and shoot. And we'll have some more information as far as like what's going to happen this fall with the club and how or if we're ever going to get back to normal. I mean, someday normal will come again in some form. We're just not sure we're there yet, but we'll talk we'll talk it over and we'll fill everybody in as soon as we know.
John, let's call it the new normal.
Well, we're on our way to the new normal. We're just not there yet.
That's right.
I don't want this to be the new normal, but I am absolutely willing to accept that there's a new normal coming.
That would be even a newer normal.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Reed always has the answer. We know that. So yeah, I guess that's it for that. Andrew, thank you so much. If you need anything from me in the future, or you want to do this again about some other topic or something, just reach out. We'd love to have you again.
That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you, and cheerio.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye,
Sean.
everyone.
Be well.
Yeah, you too. Everybody take care.
Bye.